of the personnel. Item 1 and 2 we're going to ask to be placed on consent. And item 4, I would ask that we receive and file, since it's virtually identical to number 3. So we'll just take number 3 to handle both those issues. And so if we could start with item number 3.
For item 3, the Department of Transportation has submitted a report today in cooperation with the City Administrative Officer. And this is in response to a motion requesting that the department report on the hiring of part-time traffic officers.
And if we could ask a representative from DOT, a representative from the CAO, and a representative from SEIU all to come up and join us.
Jaime, you have a security man with you now, huh?
Yes, sir. I need it.
Well qualified too, let's say.
So if we could start with a report from the DOT, that would be great.
Good afternoon. Jaime De La Vega, General Manager of DOT. I have with me Commander Mike Williams, Deputy Chief Rudy Carrasco, and also Angela's here from the CAO's office. We sent you a report earlier today in response to issues raised in a letter by SEIU Local 721 to you, Chairman Koretz. Hopefully you and your staff had time to review it. I just want to start by saying that, we are here today to say we're willing to partner and continue our constructive conversations with SEIU today and on a go-forward basis, and would be happy to work with them. Do you want me to go through the specific points of the letter, or do you have questions? What would be your
preference? Why don't you start also with just a really brief overview of your original letter, explaining why you needed the part-time officers and validating that.
Right. Well, the original memo that we sent you in response to a request by you described our process to hire part-time officers. Right now, we have 43 that have been screened, hired, and are in the field. They began work last weekend, right, Rudy? Yeah, last weekend. And this was implementing a policy approved by the council and mayor as part of the adopted budget. And the idea of the pilot is to test the idea that part-time officers could contribute to the city and to the department in a constructive way and produce a net increase in revenue. And this would be in lieu of backfilling certain full-time vacancies in our traffic officer classifications.
And also, if we could hear from SEIU as to what your responses and concerns were.
Council member, I really appreciate the opportunity. Jason Elias from SEIU Local 721. Good afternoon, Council Member Zine. We have a couple of members who are going to speak in public comments. Jaime and I actually had a great opportunity to chat as we were waiting for the committee to begin. And I just want to say that I think there is a constructive way to approach the challenge that we see in front of us, which is, and I also did warn Jaime that I was going to say this, which is that, though council did approve the budget item and moved forth, it is our understanding, and it's not in Jaime's purview or the purview of the department, but we don't feel that the CAO met their obligation to meet and confer with us in regards to the implementation of part-time officers. So while there is a budget policy in front of you, we feel that the department and CAO jumped the gun. However, given that, our discussion over the last hour, Jaime and myself, we'd like to commit to a process by which I think we can solve the solve the equation for for the amount of money that we need to increase for the department in order to meet their obligation from traffic officers. We've presented several ideas, which were in our communication to you from last week, council member. And I think we want to continue that discussion. Our biggest issue is that with part-time officers, you're getting half the work. And our traffic officers work hard every day. They don't only write tickets, they also do traffic control, as Councilmember Zine, I'm sure you're well aware of traffic function in the city. And we meet multiple purposes in the work that traffic officers do. We're committed to increasing revenue in the city, but also to keep LA moving. So I'll let the members speak for themselves, but we really feel that we've got 47 officers on the books now. The best way, 47 part-time officers, the best way to approach this is actually to figure out an implementation plan to move these part-time officers, these 47 officers, into full-time civil service work, which, as I understand from a communication with the department, the personnel department, is that because they were hired off of the civil service list, civil service rules will allow these officers to be transitioned into full-time civil service work. We are willing and ready to work with the department to figure out an implementation plan to make that happen.
And wonder if I could have a response from DOT, CAO, whatever combination seems appropriate.
Angela Berman, CAO. Just one thing that I would like to point out, that during budget discussions on the adoption of the 11-12 budget, the issue of meet and confer did come up. The city attorney did give an opinion, and it was that the meet and confer was not required for this program.
Yeah, I guess I'd add, we noted this in the report. The advantage of having a part-time workforce is we're essentially getting a longer look at these employees before hiring them. So I think that's an advantage from a management perspective, is rather than have somebody on the books for a couple months and then pass probation, you're actually able to look at them over a longer period of time. So, the better performers, you could actually transition faster than 6 months to full-time status, and others, it might take a little bit longer. And I think ultimately DOT is going to have to maintain a component of full-time traffic officers that are fully trained in all the functions, no matter what, every year on a go-forward basis. I think that, is essential because we do support fire and police and do special events on behalf of council. So we will always have to have a component of full-time traffic officers. And, our intention is the employees are doing well at the part-time level to eventually transition them into full-time work.
I have a quick comment on that.
Sure.
It's a very quick one, is that in regards to the part-time employees, we did agree in a previous contract and have been in discussions and would like to continue discussions on the implementation of Traffic Officer 1s, which is actually does the same, meets the same goals as the department is talking about here, with giving a longer look at employees as part-time. You're also going to run into a problem because out of this committee in 2001, a motion was passed that actually clarifies the hours of part-time employees, which basically says that these employees must work no more than 1,040, and because if these employees work for over 1,000 hours in 2 years contractually, they then are able to get health benefits and also become pensionable. So you won't be able to have, that longer look at these employees. I think in the long run, Traffic Officer 1, they make less money than the traffic officer workforce, which is actually Traffic Officer 2s. And that actually meets the goal that Jaime is speaking about.
Any questions, colleagues?
Is this the program that was approved in the budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're currently implementing.
Okay. And the other thing I was wondering about is that the positions, I think they were vetted, that the part-time was an appropriate classification?
Yes,
Okay, and then one of the rationales of saving money was that there was, it was part-time, there were the benefits, were no benefits, no pension.
that's correct.
Okay, and then there's also a target of something like $9 million of revenue to raise?
Yes,
Okay, and so, but that's all in motion?
yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
And then is it the goal to bring the part-times into full employment as openings become available?
I think we haven't finalized the exact protocol for that. But we need to have a conversation with the upper managers in parking enforcement to determine exactly what the mix is. Because there's going to be a minimum number of full-timers that we're going to need in any event
Right.
to support basic city operations.
Now, what's the criteria for the part-time,
As far as
hiring part-time? Is it they're coming off the street looking for
Yeah.
full-time? They're employees who want to work part-time and not
Yeah.
full-time? They're retirees? I mean, where does the mix come in? And where do we recruit from?
right, so I'll let Rudy and the commander add to this, but the current batch that are being employed right now came off an existing civil service list, and our next
They applied for full-time.
Yes, and then the next group will also be going through a civil service list process.
And do they go through the regular training like everyone else?
Mike, yes, sir. Mike Williams, Parking Enforcement. The current 43 hires that started actually working in the field this past weekend came off the existing list.
Okay.
That
They
list,
applied for full-time positions.
correct. That list has been exhausted. We are in conversations with personnel department to reestablish a list, and the additional part-timers will come off that list as well.
So they're applying for a full-time, and we have opportunities for part-time, but not full-time. They go through the same training and background, et cetera.
With the background is the same. The training is the only training they don't receive is traffic direction, because their focus is on issuing citations. Correct.
Okay. And what's the number, anticipated total number?
We 100 total.
100.
We originally, after backgrounds and disqualifications by the personnel department, we wound up with 43 actual hires.
Okay, and then as the folks retire, full-time folks, the goal is to bring those on full-time or have another group come on to full-time?
No, the goal, the idea, and Jaime and I have been in discussions about this, is to look at first for full-timers, those part-timers, because we've pretty much vetted those individuals. They've been vetted. They've been working. We have a sense of what their work ethic is and what have you. So they would be the excellent group of folks to pull from, as opposed to dragging people off the list. So we'll go through the part-timers first when those positions come open for full-timers.
That'll expedite them for full-time then,
Exactly, and they'd only have to undergo an additional week of training as well.
so everything else is taken care of.
Yes.
The cost obviously is a factor. When we're talking about part-time, how many days or how many hours are they working?
We're only allowing them to work 1,000 hours a max per year.
Per year, okay.
Otherwise, we run into issues that were referred to earlier with benefits and what have you.
Okay.
Yep.
And we have some speakers from the public, so I'd like to hear from them next. I have Jason first, but I think you've already spoken. Next speaker, if I can read this, is Mido Lee Jennings,
318.
to be followed by Darren McDaniel.
Okay. I'll as soon as we're done with this committee. Okay, thank you, buddy.
Yes.
Good afternoon, council members and everyone in the room. My name is Mindali Jennings, and I'm a traffic officer. I've been a traffic officer for 11 years. I'm here today to talk about the full-time officers having experience in implementing revenue-generating ideals that will result in increasing money for the general fund. And this can be done by reviving the following programs that only full-time traffic officers are able to do, which is abandoned sweeps, that bring in about $100 a tow to $150 for booting. Then you have the handicap detail. That's about $353 per ticket to $353 when we confiscate the placards. Then you have the scofflaws, which are $100 for tow and $150 correction for booting. You also have the school enforcement. You have the LPRs, which at this time, there's only a small detail that's on it. But if it's opened up to the rest of the traffic officers, there's more, we'd be able to get more funds from that. We know that DOT management is working on redoing the operations, and I see them every day out in the field. So I feel their presence. And
You see who in the field?
the management that's redoing the, I guess they're collecting data, and just taking it from there.
So they're out of the officers in the field.
Yes,
Okay.
management, yes. And through this process, or the DOT management process of re-implementing these revenue-generating programs, I want to reiterate to keep in mind that only full-time officers can do this, not part-timers, because they're only issuing parking tickets. And you guys just heard that we did have a couple of officers, I think they stepped down or they resigned. So just clearly remember that this is a hard job, and it's not for full-timers, it's for full-time position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Darren McDaniel. I've been a traffic officer for the city of Los Angeles for over 11 years also. Part-time officers are more likely to achieve the $9 million in revenue budgeted for this fiscal year due to the following reasons. Based on the learning curve, it takes an officer approximately 6 months to a year to become a well-rounded officer. Part-timers will only be working half of that time, and it will take them longer to learn the areas and learn how to write enforceable tickets without errors. Secondly, what we talk about is enforceable tickets. Full-time officers are invested in the larger picture of generating revenue for the city as career employees and are focused on making sure that the issuing of parking citations are enforceable. We go beyond just meeting ticket goals. Secondly, in terms of flexibility and expansive duties, part-time officers are limited to their duties, whereas full-time officers are trained to write high-revenue citations, which include, as Minda said before, booting, abandon, scofflaws, and impounding. We also deal with confidential information and assisting LAPD in writing and retrieving stolen vehicles from off the street. In terms of high efficiency, part-time officers maintain professionalism and know how to diffuse situations. It's our career, and we learn how to pick up and we learn how to do our job quicker than part-time officers because we have more time on the street than they do. Full-time officers make daily decisions that help keep the capture rate high, and we're constantly considered the safety of our citizens and focus on generating revenue for the city. Finally, I like to say on behalf of myself and other traffic officers that we feel that if you implemented a part-time program at this time, it would only diminish what we do for the city on a full-time basis for the city of LA and Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Santa Cruz Villarreal, Charles Harrell, and that's it.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First of all, I want to just reiterate to try to make those part-time employees full-time traffic officers. We want to work with the city to make parking more efficient for citizens here, and also we want to expedite the flow of traffic here. And we all know that we all have a traffic problem here in the city of LA. And most of all, we want to increase revenue for the city. We serve the public, and we are concerned about their safety also. That's a big concern of ours. In order to help the city make decisions, we requested from the CAO and from DOT information. We asked for information on revenues and expenses, and so far we have not received that information. We have also requested through correspondence, we want the correspondence that was done between the LA DOT and the CAO as far as the part-time program is concerned. And we have not received that also. We also have requested a meet and confer, and that has yet happened. So we're looking forward to that meet and confer to happen. We are not being treated as partners if we're left out of everything. We want to work with you. We want to work as a team with management. And also, this would be for the best interest of the citizens that live here in Los Angeles. Just like the council members, we also would like to generate a lot of revenue. We have a lot of ideas, and we'd like to implement those ideas to make this a better and safer place to live in. Again, I just want to reiterate to make those part-time workers full-time officers.
Your position, ma'am?
I'm a traffic officer too, and I've been a traffic officer for 26 years.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Zine, and Councilmember Koretz, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before you. It's a pretty daunting task sitting on this side of the table talking, because we have a great deal of respect for you all. The department I'm here to speak about making part-time traffic officers full-time traffic officers. The department has said that they can raise $9 million by using part-time traffic officers. These numbers are extremely challenged. The numbers don't include the hidden costs of the part-time program. The calculations were made with the methodology that was applied to full-time officers. Taking into account the rigors of the job, the turnover rate. 9 years ago, I have a script to read, I have some comments to read, but I'd rather speak from my heart. I'll hit the points. 9 years ago, my deputy chief standing back there came into my class and said that this was the best thing that he ever did in his life. He came into the city as a stepping stone, but has never left. And those words stuck with me over the years. And I see that I'm making the same tread that he has. It's hard to leave this job because we have pride for our city. The turnover rate, due to the rigors of the job, will discourage part-time traffic officers from staying on. The citation goals that they'll have to meet, confrontations with the public, the high probability of them leaving for better paying jobs, it will be extremely high. Supervision. It was stated that part-time employees will receive more supervision. Initially, we will receive the same training and be held to the same standards. But full-time traffic officers will have the in-field time to adapt faster to changing environments and with the public and enforcement patterns. They need to have a higher capture rate for tickets. We love this city. We're devoted to this city. We ask that you review it and make these part-time officers full-time officers. I asked that we did a paradigm shift a little while ago, and I had an idea that said, why not call back the retirees and bring them on as consultants? That way you wouldn't even shake up the full-time officers, and we would accept them. They would already be trained. They would already have the backgrounds and everything. So I ask you to consider that and make the part-time officers full-time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If we could bring back up DOT. A couple questions that were raised during the commentary. One point that was made was that there are a lot of high-value tickets that can't be done by these part-time officers. Are we focusing adequately on some of these high-value and more significant tickets like handicap zones, et cetera? And is it true that really can't be done by part-time officers?
Rudy Carrasco, Deputy Chief, LADOT. As a matter of fact, we've trained these part-time officers to focus on all types of citations. As they continue to receive training, we will expand their enforcement base. Currently, we're focusing primarily on meter enforcement. That's it's the easiest type of enforcement level for a beginning traffic officer, and it also allows us to monitor their performance at a very tight-knit level. But ultimately, they'll be in a position where they'll be able to issue all types of citations.
Rudy,
But
can you also
nothing legally that would prevent them from doing scofflaws or handicap detail or any of those categories?
The intention initially to provide training to our part-time officers was to place them in a position where they would have minimal impact on operations with regards to equipment and vehicles and handheld devices. So by placing them in our meter enforcement beats, we can deploy them on foot. It has minimal impact on our operations, and their primary focus will be on meter enforcement.
Okay, and there's also a question about the learning curve and the difficulty in training part-time officers and getting them to respond in the same manner that a full-time officer would.
Part-time officers are receiving the exact same training modules that we provide to full-time officers, and all traffic officers who have come through the program, including myself, have had a training curve to overcome. So as we provide them with training and additional training, we intend to enhance their ability to provide parking enforcement services.
And there's also the concern that people know they're coming on part-time without benefits, etc. Didn't apply for that, so when they have the opportunities, they'll leave for something better. Have we looked at that, and how do we think that'll impact the turnover rates and their efficiency overall?
Yeah, the compensation package that's provided to each of the part-timers was fully disclosed to them prior to hiring them. So, they're fully aware of what the terms of the employment were. We haven't done this program before, so I can't really speculate on what the turnover might be. I mean, I think that was really one of the purposes of doing a pilot from the council and mayor, was to answer that question and others.
I mean, my initial inclination would be during this economic downturn, people would grab what they could get rather than have nothing. But the second they find a full-time job, they're likely to jump ship unless they see certainly a clear career ladder, etc. So I don't know whether we're taking that into account and anticipating that. Are we?
Yeah, I mean, we are, we're aware of that situation. I think in other departments and other classifications, a number of people have started as an intern or a part-timer in the city with the anticipation of having a future opportunity, getting that experience with the city.
And the idea of bringing back retirees, have we considered that? Is there any circumstance where that seems practical?
We haven't specifically looked at that. We're happy to talk to the union about how that may work.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a few. The job versus a career. I agree with what the one gentleman mentioned. When you joined as a young person, and now with those hash marks, you're obviously a mature person. And growing up with the bars and the stars. And I did the same thing with the LAPD, and my colleague, Councilman Parks, did the same thing. So the city has been very good to us, and we love working for the city. Respect for what DOT does. It's a challenging task. You got unhappy people. When you give them a citation, they come out and they're ranting and raving, and I've seen those situations, and I understand what they do. So a lot of respect for what the enforcement folks do. Administrators, you're behind a desk, a nice air-conditioned office, and they're out in the streets, and I understand how it is, especially in the valley where I come from, 100 and some degrees. So a lot of respect for what they do. The issue of the LPR, it says all LPR vehicles currently are deployed. A testimony from one of the individuals was that they don't have them all deployed. Are all the LPR units out there deployed?
They are.
Yes,
Okay.
council member. All operational LPRs are currently being
Operational,
deployed.
so that's the key word. How many are
Correct.
out of operation?
We are in the process now of evaluating. We have our
Citywide?
Yes, correct. Our some of our cameras are
So how many you got working?
ill repaired.
How many are working?
About 60% of them are
Okay, so
operational.
40%
40% are
be fixed.
either being repaired or being upgraded.
And I know there's a concern about revenues, and we look at DOT as a revenue-producing department. When it comes to the abandoned handicap, scofflaws, school, LPR, et cetera, do we get 100%? Because I know we don't get 100% of the traffic violations from the motor officers, the vehicle code. Majority of it goes to the state, the county, we get a small portion. On a DOT enforcement, on those criteria, do we get 100%? Like on handicap, which is an expensive ticket, do we get 100% of all the revenues? Or is it split with state, county, and whomever else?
Split.
There is a split.
There's a split, yes.
Okay, now LAMC, we get 100% on LAMC? Like a parking zone, a red zone, or do we split on all the fines? Do we know?
We'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not
Okay.
sure what the split is.
Because we need to
Councilmember
understand
Devine
it.
on
We know
that.
there's a huge split on enforcement for the vehicle code with LAPD, a majority of it goes to the state. Like on a $500 ticket, we get $157. The rest goes to the state and county. We need to figure out, because we're talking about revenue. They're going to produce a lot of revenue. Are they actually producing the revenue? Because we write a citation for $300+ for handicap. Are we getting $300+ or are we getting $100?
Yeah.
So there's a big difference in that when it comes to the cost factor. The money for the city, for salaries. We're doing this obviously to keep traffic moving and give these people opportunity to get a full-time job. And I look at it two ways. If they're committed to it, they'll stay with it. And if they're not committed to it, it's not for them, then they'll move on to some other profession. But if they're committed to it, it gives them an opportunity. I started as a student worker with LAPD. I liked it, joined it 33 years later, became a council member, et cetera. It may not be for everyone. So those that want to take a part-time and then leave, no loss to us, no loss to them, but obviously the career wasn't in their path. The other cities, do any other cities have a program similar to this where they have a part-time, or are they all full-time folks?
I'm not aware of any other cities that part-time. I know a lot of cities, including West Hollywood and what have you, are contract. They don't have they have private contractors that do their parking enforcement.
Okay, so they're not law enforcement personnel; they're contract.
Correct.
Okay, whereas we have the city employees with the full backing and responsibility of a city department.
Correct.
Right now, just because I happen to have unique,
You are West
I happen
Hollywood.
to have unique knowledge of
There you
that. Originally, it was a sheriff's contract, and the sheriffs were not able to provide enough personnel to keep up,
right.
so we had to go to a private contractor. I found that to be both a positive and a negative experience because the private contractor really was focused just on writing
Revenues.
tickets.
Correct.
And they wrote some tickets that were inappropriate and they were overly aggressive. And West Hollywood has a reputation of having the parking Nazis to this day.
But what's it called? Parking Nazis?
People have called us that and worse.
They don't call LA people that, though.
I don't think LAPD
got
has
love
that
and compassion.
reputation.
Love and compassion.
I mean, people still yell at LAPD, people writing tickets too, but I don't think we have a reputation for being overly aggressive. I think we handle it appropriately. And my hope is that if we stay with these part-time officers, we train them properly to get them to continue in that mode.
And so part of the budget was we'd hire the part-time since we didn't have money for full-time, but the plan of the department is to bring these folks on board if they work out full-time as we get openings in the department. How many openings exist now?
Rudy, do you know how many we have open right now?
Well, currently, we're approximately 15 to 16 vacancies based on our authorized positions.
Okay, so under those authorized positions, would you then bring 15 or 16 part-times up? Or, I mean, if that's the plan.
That's Councilman Zine. We have not had a in-depth discussion about how that process will work.
Okay.
But conceptually, the idea is to look at those part-timers first. When and if we get authorization to hire full-timers, we will defer to those part-timers
Do you
because
go to
of,
managed hiring?
yes,
Okay.
yes, we do.
I know that it's a cumbersome process. That's all I have for now.
Let me just comment. One thing I think is important, this budget calls for 100 part-time employees.
Correct.
And the $9 million that we hope it raises, we hope saves us from laying off people in the future. And so it's not being accumulated to then put into a full-time traffic program. The issue is trying to restrain ourselves from laying more people off. And so that revenue is part of this year's budget.
Correct.
And if we don't hit that mark somewhere around May or June of next year, we could be talking about more layoffs at that time. So
Of full-time people.
Of full-time people. So this is why they were put in there as what we thought was an inexpensive revenue-generating idea for a 12-month period. And so the idea about whether they
term on it?
Well, that's for this budget year. We don't know what Jaime and the mayor will ask for next year, but the issue was not that money was being pigeonholed somewhere to be used otherwise, nor is this, although their thought process is about potential candidates for future positions, those future positions are not in our near future. They may not even be in next year's budget.
Yep.
And so the key is that we may have a proposal that says, can we keep the 100 part-timers to keep doing what they're doing? And so I think that transition is a ways away.
And another point I'd bring up is on special events where you have a big demand for personnel directing traffic. Are these folks in that pool or not?
No, sir.
Okay, that's one of the concerns I have is we've had some events where in my district where I've stopped by and the DOT supervisor has told me, well, we called for so many showed up. What happens if they don't show up? Well, they don't show up. It's kind of like there's an option. And I said, well, that doesn't really work well when you have to block intersections. You may want to look into the retirees if they wanted to fill a void. When you have special events, you need a big demand for personnel. But I understand the policy is you get an overtime detail, and if you don't show up, you don't show up.
Well, Councilman,
That seems to be a problem.
Well, it is a problem, to be quite frank with you, and we're addressing that problem. There are we've put into place some corrective measures. There's consequences for folks not showing up to events now.
This is an overtime that they're volunteering.
Correct. And
That still doesn't help if they don't show up. It's worse than
well,
it
it eventually will, because the word will get down that there are consequences for not showing up for details that you were assigned to.
And you're charging that for that vendor or that event for personnel that aren't there, which is another situation that rears
Yes.
its ugly head. So that's that. But anyway, you may want to look into retirees if they'd be interested in that. But I had the concern when people are supposed to be there and they're not there, and you're running short of personnel that voluntarily sign up for events, even though they're getting cash for it. Sometimes they don't want to show.
Yep.
Okay.
But I think we need to clarify that any event organizer that gets charged, it's reconciled at the end of the day if those personnel were not
Correct,
used.
through the boss system.
So
Correct.
the key is that on the special events, there is a process to reconcile the bill.
Right.
And you folks come up with the number of personnel necessary to run that event.
That's correct.
DOT makes that determination.
correct.
So if you need 15, you have 5, then you got a problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest that we bring this item back at our first meeting in September, that we give SEIU a chance to respond to DOT's relatively last-minute response to the report and give us a chance to digest that more and another chance to ask questions. While you're at it, I'd ask that we get the info that Mr. Zine asked about which citations and what percentage we give to different levels of government other than ourselves, that we give the opportunity for DOT and SEIU to continue their talks and perhaps have some agreement on how these things should be handled. If you can have a more fleshed out plan for, in essence, a career track for the part-timers, that we have an official plan on how to track them into full-time or give them at least that opportunity, and whether there are opportunities that we haven't looked at for retirees. So I think that covers all the things we asked for back. Anything missing?
That's good. You got it.
So we'll ask for that to come back in September. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Next, item number 5. Oh, first, since Mr. Parks is here, we should give him the opportunity to vote on consent items 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's fine.
And on the receive and file for number 4. And now if we could have item number 5.
On item 5, the Personnel Department has submitted a report relative to the impact of national healthcare reform and future health benefits and costs. This is pursuant to adopted budget recommendation, instructing the department to provide said report.
If we could have a report from the department.
Yes, my name is Ana Chavez from the Personnel Department. And
Actually, give me 1 second for everybody to quietly depart. Thank you.
Okay. So again, Ana Chavez for the Personnel Department. This is to officially transmit the report from the Personnel Department to the Committee on National Healthcare Reform. As part of the Council's deliberation on the proposed fiscal year 2011-12 budget, the Personnel Department was requested to report to this committee on how future health benefits and costs will be impacted by national healthcare reform. On May the 5th of 2011, the CAO transmitted the report, memo number 121, which contained the Personnel Department's response to the Council's question on national health care reform. However, the City Clerk's office informed us that the attachment has not yet become part of the official Council file. So this is just a formality that we're introducing the report so it can become part of the file.
Okay. First question is, how are we keeping an eye on sort of who's minding the store? Are we making sure that city interests are being protected in our ongoing discussions in Washington regarding the future of healthcare reform?
The Personnel Department is monitoring the changes of the national healthcare reform, and we have enlisted the help with our Mercer consultant, and who they're also keeping track of those changes, reporting it to us, and we report to the Joint Labor Benefits Committee, and we make any reports necessary to the council.
So are we working with our labor partners to make sure we have a seat at the table during these discussions rather than just monitoring them? Are we looking for opportunities to actually provide input and have an impact on these discussions?
The discussions at the Washington level?
Yes.
I'm not aware.
Brian Kikita from Mercer, who's one of the benefits consultants to the City of Los Angeles. I'm not aware of any involvement by labor in terms of having a so-called seat at the table with these Washington regulations, but I think they would have to respond on their own.
Well, the question is, are we working with them to try and get a seat at the table? Are we trying to have the City of Los Angeles have some input into what's going on? Or are we just monitoring what's going on?
We are monitoring it.
Is there any reason why we're not trying to take a more hands-on role in what's happening?
I think the chief legislative analyst does get reports, and they monitor.
Come on, Ms. Gibson.
Come on, Jim.
Sorry.
Tell us about your last trip to Washington.
Ms. Gibson, there you go.
I'm sorry, sir. What was the question?
Well, essentially, are we just being passive and monitoring what's going on, or are we trying to be more involved and have some input into the healthcare reform?
Well, wasn't there a recent determination that there's some question as to the legality of having a requirement that everybody buy into health care? And so I think what the Personnel Department as well as Mercer have done so far is ensuring that the city's health benefits are in compliance with the national health care requirements that we are required to comply with. Beyond that, I'm not really quite sure in terms of the ability of the city to be able to advance anything else. I think, that the legislation is extremely complicated as is, and so I'm not really quite sure what more the council member would be interested in the city to be able to do.
Well, I'm just thinking, as the policy develops, it would seem that we would want to have some input into that.
Well, if there are some specific ideas, that your office would like for us to convey to the federal government, we'd be happy to do that. I think that the Personnel Department as well as Mercer have really done an excellent job in monitoring. What I observed was thousands and thousands of pages of the legislation. So with respect to anything else that might be done, we'd be happy to talk to your staff of any ideas that you may have, different and separate from what's already been enacted. But as of right now, when I'm looking at Jennifer, it's my understanding, since we're involving everybody, it's my understanding that, the legality is in question right now. And so beyond that, I'm really not quite sure, what your office is interested, in our office do. But again, we'd be happy to confer with your staff.
And I'm not totally up on the legal questions, so could you give us a little more background on the legality in question that you're referring to?
Well, let me start, and I'm going to look at Jennifer, and she can follow up. But it's my understanding that there's some question as to the fundamental issue of the national program is the requirement that everybody has to buy into the healthcare program. And there is some question as to whether or not that's even legally permissible.
And I think there was a state
specific ideas and monitoring, unless we have a focus, unless they've given direction on what you want the monitoring and the advocacy to focus on, it's a bit amorphous to just attack the entire, not attack, but to try and guide, if you will, the policy development.
So on the legal case, if it was ruled that everyone didn't have to buy in, wouldn't that pretty much end national health care because there wouldn't be a mechanism to fund it?
Not necessarily, because then Congress would have to step in and figure out what to do next.
Which with this Congress would probably mean nothing. So I'm assuming that would be it.
It's hard to speculate on what would happen after the Supreme Court makes a ruling on the issue, assuming when and if they do.
Very interesting. Any other questions?
Yeah, one thing on that question of what's the city doing, I think the city took a resolution in support of national health care maybe a year or two ago between our representation on the National League of Cities and also the Conference of Mayors. Those two organizations are working towards solutions and monitoring what's going on national health care. And with that resolution, our lobbyists are in Washington also following and causing the city's position. And I think from our charter that the mayor has to be the one that takes that lead as it relates to lobbying. And so I think there's a lot of things going on, but as June said, that the legal challenges to it are probably what causes it to be in somewhat limbo until some of them are resolved. But there's a lot of things going on that we get bulletins from National League of Cities and a variety of national organizations that are monitoring in behalf of city municipalities.
Mr. Zion?
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. On your next trip to D.C., please inform us.
Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'd suggest we note and file
Here we go.
the report.
Stand by. The daily test. The daily test. This is a test. Why don't they do it when we're not here? Why when we're here?
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the Office of Public Safety. We are conducting a test of the PA system at this time in this building.
It's working fine.
Okay, stop. Repeat, this is only a test. This is only a test.
They say something different every
Yeah. Push a button. All right, we done?
So moving on to item number 6.
For item 6, what you have before you is a motion instructing the chief legislative analyst to work with the city administrative officer and the personnel department to report on the possible policy changes needed to suspend someone's pension as a result of a conviction of a felony in conjunction with an individual job-related duties while employed by the city of Los Angeles.
If we could have a report from the CLA, I guess, on this.
Mr. Shelley, if you want to report to this one. Ms. Gibson.
Well, okay, this is a motion, and I am assuming that the committee is going to be instructing the specified offices and departments to be able to collaborate and to report back. I think the critical issue is there really seem to be a lot of legal implications relative to this, and we would suggest that the instruction be modified for us to work with the city attorney on the report back.
Okay, and I guess I have a question of the author. If your intent is to suspend pension benefits or to actually require that the public employee who committed a felony to forfeit his pension benefits and membership in the public employee pension system that he belongs to.
Well, this resulted from certain city employees who were involved in felony activity while employed by the state of Los Angeles. It was something outside of employment. It was during their employment where they were basically doing illegal felony activities. And we're trying to find some kind of avenue to show that if you're a city employee and you're at the taxpayer's expense and you're out there doing something that is a felony, would be a very serious, and we'd have to come up with the different categories as a city employee, that there'd be some serious consequences. That was the motivation, but it generated from some building and safety inspectors who were on the take, arrested by the FBI, pled guilty to the charges. So it would have to be classified as a very serious felony to the result of some serious consequences resulting in the pension. So it generated from that activity. We don't have the particulars, but we think it would serve as a deterrent where someone would think twice if they wanted to go out. If you're off duty and you get drunk driving, or you get involved in some kind of other activity where you're off and commit a robbery, that wouldn't qualify. It would be one you're being paid for by the taxpayers in your position as a city employee. So it wouldn't qualify for your personal life, but only for your time when you're working, and during those work hours you're committing serious felonies. So we'd have to go into a lot of detail to identify, make sure it complies, but to have some serious consequences for those who commit those serious felonies. And the one that was illustrated most recent was the building and safety inspectors who were taking bribes while they were on duty.
Yeah, a few other questions, which I think are a list of things that we need to consider as we look at this. I'll just ask them on the record to be not necessarily answered this minute, but to be considered. One, would suspension of pension benefits be the same as confiscating a person's vested property rights? Two, how would we deal with or view this in terms of the innocent spouse and family of a convicted employee? Under our three pension systems, do retirement, death, and disability benefits extend to a public employee's dependents? And could suspension or forfeiture of pension benefits be construed to abrogate the rights of an innocent spouse who wasn't involved in the commission of the criminal activity? Would the felony the employee is convicted of need to be limited to certain types of crimes? Or could crimes of moral turpitude also be included, as opposed to fraud, bribery, theft, etc.? Also, after doing some research, my staff found that determining when a felony conviction relates to, arises out of, or is in connection with a person's public employment may be an issue. And so there's a question of whether there needs to be a nexus between the felony committed and the public employment for pension benefits to be suspended or terminated. Also, would the employee's contributions to the pension system need to be returned to the employee, and whether there'd be interest on those contributions or whether they'd be kept by the system, and whether it would be appropriate for the CLA, CAO, personnel department, and city attorney all to work together on this issue. And lastly, has the personnel department completed a review requested by the city controller relative to allowing the city to seek restitution for job-related crimes? And will there be a report submitted to the city council on that? So those are just some questions to be considered as we move forward with that. And I actually would formally amend the motion to instruct the CLA, CAO, personnel department, and city attorney to work together on the legal ramifications of the policy changes. And otherwise, I would ask that the motion be adopted as amended, and a report back include answers to those questions at the same time. So,
Let me just, one thing that may save a lot of work is to just talk to the city attorney, because from all my information about pensions, they're a contract between the city and the employee. The other issue, I think, if it happens while on duty, you have the disciplinary process that either can remove them from duty or discipline them. But once they vest their pension, unless you put it into your entry-level requirements to say your pension is never vested, that you will lose it if you get involved in criminal activity, which in some instances people would look at that as not being a pension. But that's what I would think that you could save a lot of time. The city attorney has reams of stuff about what pension vesting means and things of that nature.
But there have been situations, sad as they are, where city employees, while on duty as a city employee, have killed other city employees. And I can see a person going to jail and collecting a city pension while the family members of those who've been murdered suffer consequences. So, I mean, we're talking about egregious situation,
We've seen a
not
lot
something minor.
But we've sent a lot of pensions to San Quentin.
Yeah, see, well, it doesn't matter if it's a member of the public safety department or something else, but when they cross that line into that area, then there's got to be at least some consequences. It seems highly inappropriate for someone to be serving time in prison and receiving a pension while they're in prison, and some other family is suffering consequences of that individual's activity. So,
I think
but
there-
all those questions are all valid. We need to do obviously research on it, but it's a way to open the door into making some corrective action.
And my understanding is in Bell, they're expecting Robert Rizzo to be able to collect his pension regardless of what the other repercussions are.
Yeah,
So
see, those are atrocities.
it may be that there are some things we can do under our existing laws and some things we need to do just as a preventative measure in the future.
Right.
So if we could move forward the
We count
amendment.
that as a no right here.
Oh, are you a no to?
Yes, I have difficulty with that.
I have no difficulty with it. I'm
So,
a yes.
so this will be a 2-to-1 vote on this item as directed.
Number
And
7.
item number 7?
On item 7, the city administrative officer has submitted reports in response to an adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the CEO to convene a task force with the city attorney, the police department, and the fire department to improve risk management policy to prevent high-risk liability. And there is a request for a police administrator 2 position to address risk management issues with the LAPD. Budget and Finance considered this item on the 15th and has recommended approval of the CEO recommendations, and the item is scheduled for council consideration on Friday.
And do we need to adjourn the Personnel Committee and go into a special meeting? No, okay. But this will be a special meeting of Personnel and Audits and Government Efficiency as a special joint meeting. So if we could have a report?
Yes, thank you. As has been noted already today, one of the important things that we can do to help the city's economic conditions and also help our employees is to develop a much better risk management system. The police department has been gradually working on this and trying to reorganize by establishing a risk management division. Presently, the Risk Management Division consists of 56 police officers and 43 civilians and 3 reserves. And what they do is a good 2/3 of them assist the city attorney in preparation of litigation and do the investigation work. The majority of the rest do the California Records Act, the pitches motions, subpoenas, and any other discovery. And then there's a small unit called Risk Analysis that works on the Risk Management Executive Committee, which makes recommendations to the chief about particular problem employees that pursuant to an agreement with the Protective League and a lawsuit settlement that should be removed from the field, and that has to go through a process. And then we have a small unit called the Protective Activities Unit, which is really a retaliation prevention unit. Since in the last year, we've also instituted a retaliation prevention committee, which is made up of the assistant chiefs, the employee relations person, personnel, the special assistant, myself, and professional standards to review in general. We meet on a monthly or 6 weeks basis, and also we now have recently convened an ad hoc group when individual problems are told to us, like had we had this group when the issue that was discussed this morning, was it this morning or this afternoon? This afternoon in council, the settlement, we would have had a chance to review that and deal with that, and we have taken action in a few cases where I believe we prevented lawsuits. So the purpose of our risk management is to make it a better place for the employees to work and to prevent lawsuits. One of the things that the chief of police has determined is that we would be well served if we had a person that we called the risk manager, who was somebody versed in risk management, either through business, through whatever kind of legal education, whatever, to act as a risk manager. If that person has a legal education, the person will not be acting as a lawyer, as I have not acted as a lawyer in the 8.5 years. God, it's a long time already. And our information technology person, Maggie Goodrich, also is a lawyer. We do not act as lawyer. We act as employees of the department in charge of our particular areas. So this person will be a person who reports to the chief of police and who will be basically doing training, helping out develop supervision techniques, and then being called in when necessary, and will liaison with the city attorney's office to ensure that all of the things that we need to do to support the city attorney's office are done. To pay for this, we have presented a plan as outlined in the CAO's plan that shows that we will keep positions vacant to pay for this, and it will be, therefore it's cost neutral for the for our budget. We've also made it a resolution, requested to be a resolution authority, so this, if this doesn't work, next year's budget we can deal with it and either abandon the position or try something else. But it all goes to the fact that we all understand and acknowledge our responsibilities to try to find a place where the employees feel not only safe, but they also feel they're being treated fairly, and we prevent lawsuits so that we have less lawsuits, therefore pay less judgments.
Okay, I'm going to ask that we have our two speakers speak briefly. First, Tyler Eisen from LA Police Protective League, and then Peter Repovich from LA Police Protective League.
Hi, Tyler Eisen from the Los Angeles Police Protective League. We are in favor of a risk manager and the department seeking risk management solutions. We are, however, concerned that the search for that risk manager be comprehensive and appropriate for a multi-billion-dollar organization. Should be a nationwide search, and we should seek out a person who has the experience and background to do this. And frankly, there are rumors running rampant that there's a possible pre-selected candidate out there, and that is our concern right now.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter Repovich, Director of Police Protective League. For many years, we've been very concerned about the liability that's been put upon the city based on these lawsuits. We're very concerned, like as the department is, as to how this money gets going out the back door, and we end up losing lawsuits. We've taken a fairly active role in bringing items to the attention of the mayor's office when we saw cases to try to prevent or settle these things before they got to a full-blown lawsuit. So we've been very active. It seems, though, throughout time, a lot of that has fallen on deaf ears. And if you point to some cases that have occurred recently, having to do with the Anderson case and some others. We brought those to the attention of the council body to try to mitigate that stuff. I think what's really important is that somehow the city council, before it gets to the stage of a full-blown lawsuit, somehow get involved in order to monitor what is going on so that we can prevent this stuff, because whatever we've done so far isn't working. And I know the department has been very diligent in attempting to try to mitigate this stuff, but I think that since you're the final arbiters of all these lawsuits, and ultimately the general fund is the final arbiter to these lawsuits, that we need to do a little bit more. So in concept, I think that we're in concurrence with the department about trying to solve that problem. The how, the remedy to fix that is more important, how they go forward to do it. And I think in the letter that you received from the president of the Protective League, the qualifications are really important, that they actually have risk management experience from a multi-billion-dollar company point of view, that they go out and they do a search, a nationwide type search, to get somebody that's very familiar with this kind of problem that we're experiencing, so that when we go to fix it, it actually gets fixed. That's all I have. Thank you.
And I'll just start with a follow-up to a couple of questions from what the Police Protective League just suggested, and then I will pass it on to my colleagues who have many more decades of law enforcement experience than I. Is there a way that the council could be more involved in some of these major cases before they become lawsuits?
Yes, we can, and Chief Moore's here, who's I'm sure done this. We can submit regular reports through the department, through the commission, to the council, telling them what's coming. I assume we'd have to do that in closed session, as was done today. This department, as the council knows, is always responsive when the council asks for a report. We can give you a report in conjunction with the city attorney, who will be the one to tell you what the pending lawsuits are, the pending claims, and what we're doing. And we always assumed that was part of our responsibility.
And as opposed to pending lawsuits, this is pre-lawsuits, potential lawsuits, and
the problem with
ways to head them off. How do you know when a potential lawsuit exists?
We find out at times where problems are. I am not sure, and the city attorney would have to give us advice, if we're allowed to come forward to the city council and present issues like, we have a problem in this area because these three officers are fighting with each other. I don't know if we can do that under the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, but we certainly can provide whatever information is permitted to obtain and provide. And I don't know if Chief Moore has anything.
Yeah. Peter Echeverria, City Attorney's Office. Yes, obviously there are, although there may not be specific personnel matters that can be brought forth, there are situations in which the department can identify issues that may perhaps require funding, perhaps require other administrative measures to be taken with the support of council, and at times just to let you know what the status is of the risk management steps that have been taken. Those, I think, are good things to do. I think Budget and Finance Committee has tried over the years to get not just LAPD but all departments and our office as well to report with more frequency and more detail as to the types of risks and trends that we see, so that not only is the information there, but then they're assured that the thought processes are there to try and prevent future liability for the city.
Well, certainly my sense in the short time I've been on Budget and Finance over the couple of years, almost everything we hear is cases way after the fact where someone is getting an award that seems way out of line with what the problem was, and in most cases, you look at it and say, well, couldn't we have changed our approach to this, and this, and never have been in this situation?
And Assistant Chief Michael Moore with Office of Special Operations, and I'm accompanying this presentation today to provide further information. And to this issue, the department, as Councilman Parks is aware, and Councilman Zine, and to your involvement with city activities with LAPD, we've had a risk management executive committee. This department has been engaged in risk management activities for many years, with mixed results. Sometimes better results than others. This is an initiative that the Chief of Police is strongly supportive of, to add yet another resource to better coordinate that risk management. When you talk about instances coming before this council, many times it's in settlement phase, which is frankly after the problem has resulted in litigation, in either a settlement or a judgment by a court. The risk management of the department has to be, and I'll use a counterterrorism term, left of the boom. It has to be in advance of these. That risk management needs to be strategic. It needs to be one that's based on what are the emerging threats in regards to the management of our greatest and most important and frankly most expensive resource, and that is our people. This is an initiative by the department that's consistent with recommendations of this council that's been confirmed by the CAO to take an individual and give that individual the responsibility, the point, if you will, reportable through Mr. Chaliff to the Chief of Police. What are our strategies? What are our emerging threats? What are we doing specifically? And establish benchmarks of where we're going and how well that accountability is actually occurring. Today, I don't think we're in that position. We see that by, frankly, at times responding once the litigation occurs. Instances in which we look this risk management to be helpful to is areas such as grievances, such as small level disputes that occur between individual employees or between first, second, third line supervision and employees. Those are things that a seasoned risk manager can look at and can look and delve into areas of focus that our organization needs to. We agree with the league as the league agrees with us. This is a multi-billion-dollar operation. It needs a sophisticated program, and while as a senior manager with our department, I believe we have a framework, but I think we have more ground to cover and improvements that can be made. And on behalf of Chief Beck, we're here to support and ask this council for its support of an initiative that we believe everyone is shaking their head saying, yes, it's needed.
Yeah, I think there's very little disagreement with that.
And if I may just follow up on that, the one concern that our office has with this position being created and the possibility that it be, let me put it this way, just another lawyer, is that you won't have the risk management expertise that is called for, particularly in a department with the kind of risk that we face at LAPD. I mean, we're all too much aware of that. So the only concern that we have is that the focus be on hiring somebody who has strong risk management experience and qualifications. Whether or not they have a law degree is really beside the point. Rather than hiring somebody who has a law degree because they have some experience with litigating matters and not necessarily the risk management aspects, we're not concerned about another lawyer criticizing our work. We criticize ourselves. Every time you get two lawyers in a room, you get three opinions about how something should have been done or could have been done. But we are concerned that the required risk management expertise and a cooperative and productive relationship that better serves the city among complementary professionals be created so that we can reduce this liability that is so great.
And that was going to be essentially my other question. What are we doing to make sure it's the most highly qualified person? Are we actually doing a national search, et cetera?
We can't do a search until you approve the position.
Well, what are our plans? Are we planning to do a national search?
We will do we will do a nationalized search through the personnel department, as we do searches for other things. So it'll be done that way. There's always, in response to some of the leak comments, there's always rumors. But the chief of police has not hired anybody, hasn't decided to hire anybody, and he just wants right now to get this position approved so we can proceed with the process of hiring somebody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zine, it's all yours.
Thank you. This started with my committee that looked at some of the numbers, which are staggering as far as multi-million dollars in payouts with the police department and the fire department. Chief Mack, you guys have had your share of issues also. The position will save when we look at the difference between the folks that we're not going to put into place a salary savings of $44,000, so it's not an economic negative. It will be a positive as far as some cost savings. And one of the recommendations is CAO recommends that they submit a 6-month status report. This is a 1-year pilot, shall we say, for this particular position. There's an analysis of millions of dollars that have been lost internal, not external, as we see what's happening in Fullerton right now with the death of an individual and a very upset community with the police department, with the city council, with the mayor. Most of these cases we're looking at with the law enforcement and with the fire department are internal. The risk management division, there's 101 individuals assigned to risk management with LAPD, 101 individuals. There's Teams 2, which was designed, a very expensive program, to identify problem personnel. There's the Inspector General, which was established with the staff of the Inspector General. We've put layers and layers and layers to reduce the cost and to try and eliminate problems within the organizations. While we have 40,000 some city employees, it seems that there's 2 departments that generate most of the claims, especially the internal claims, when it comes to discriminatory practice, et cetera, and that's the police and the fire department. When we look at Professional Standards Bureau, Internal Affairs, they're all good in nature, but are they accomplishing what needs to be accomplished? We know about a recent case in West Traffic where 2 officers received a total of $2 million because of a quota that was established in that particular division, which is against the law. We know there's other litigation taking place. So with the risk manager position, we want to make sure in this 1-year program is that they will be able to have the responsibility, the authority to do what needs to be done. And it seems from my history of 43 years with LAPD is that there's always the investigation and the discipline from the lieutenant level down, yet the command staff has seemed to escape for the most part, and the most recent, as we've seen in West Traffic Division, transfer to another place. Hopefully this position of risk management will go from the top down, from Jerry Chaliff in the civilian capacity to the sworn personnel, and hold people accountable. We keep on talking about accountability, accountability, accountability. And who does it report to? Who does this position report to? I heard Mr. Chaliff testify in Budget Finance to report to him. I hear today it's going to report to the Chief of Police.
The chief hasn't made a final determination. The initial one was it would report to the chief through me because of my position as a special assistant.
But in addition to that, there's a concern that the risk management, which we all think, all admit has failed, and it's lacking, that there be reporting to other entities. They're being reporting to the Government Efficiency Committee. There's a quiet request from the Police Commission. We need to make sure that there's a follow-up to say, is this working? Are we actually reducing cost, or is it continuing on the same path? So one of the recommendations is that we would have, in addition to the chief, in addition to Mr. Chaliff, that we'd have a quarterly report to the Office of Government Efficiency, to Public Safety. We would maintain the review to make sure it's working. And if it's not working, then we say, well, you know what, let's try something else. And I commend the department for saying we need to do something to change the reflection of where we're going with it. The issue of the permanency, it's not a permanent position, it's a temporary position. They're not a litigator for the department. That's going to be maintained with the city attorney. I know there's been meetings in my office with the city attorney, with the department, who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that. It seems that the police department has a situation, and then the city attorney's office has to engage in the litigation. What we're trying to do with this is avoid litigation. We can avoid litigation and not sell out everything, but how do we resolve it? Do we have an ombudsman in the department at this time, Chief Moore?
No.
Okay. Well, we had one.
But if I want to address that, there is a workplace unit team that investigates issues that the former ombudsman office was overseeing. The department's efforts, and it's, you know, the organization of the department is one of evolution, much as every organization is in our time. You identified earlier strategies that have sprang over the last 20 years in the department's evolution, whether it be the creation of the Inspector General's office and its role with an interaction with the Board of Police Commissioners, it be the creation of Teams 2, this workplace unit, the more traditional employee relations group, PSB, risk management. These are all steps that have been taken that I believe the department department has fared well in many instances in demonstrating that they have had traction and they have made improvements. We're a much better place today than we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago in some of these issues. However, we're not where we need to be, and this is this one PA2 is not going to be the panacea. It is in fact a guarantee not to be a panacea, and we should not look to it as the fact that a year from now we would sit here and not have liability. The other aspect of that is much to be understood. As much as the fire department and the police department bring much liability to the city, we also are engaged in the most at-risk activities. The work of the police department is not one of a cooperative nature in many instances.
Chief, let me stop you for a moment. West Traffic Division is internal. Bomb Squad was internal. You've got I'm not talking about getting involved in a shooting and hurting someone in an altercation. I'm talking about internal issues where a situation takes place, internal with employee versus employee.
No, I agree with you.
And I agree. There's issues on the outside that we really have no control over. Car crashes and arrests, and someone dies in custody. I'm talking about the internal risk management that I think we have a serious problem addressing. That's what I'm referring to, not the outside. And I agree. Certain situations, an officer-involved shooting, an officer-involved altercation, officer gets involved in a car crash, going to a Code 3 call, we have liability. My issue is the internal workings where one employee doesn't get along with another employee, and then it escalates to a lawsuit, and all of a sudden now we're paying millions of dollars. That's the concern I have. That's what I hope this position will then identify and rectify.
That's what it is for, and also it'll be not only involved in all of the things we talked about, but also in ensuring that we train everybody correctly so that we can develop the right habits as opposed to the wrong habits, including what you talked about before, which is certain people get punished and others don't. We have to develop a different culture, and that person will work on that aspect too.
And that's the key. So there is no question there's a huge liability when an officer in uniform with a weapon goes out there on the street to protect society and something happens and they do it with good intentions. We're going to accept those liabilities and we have to deal with it. But when employees don't get along for some reason, it escalates to what we're facing with this. Okay, now the city attorney, LAPD proposal, you folks support it, but there's a question regarding who's going to be responsible. They're responsible for the training, for the administration, and we don't want to have a conflict with the city attorney's office. So
that's
we
correct.
sort that out.
Actually, we also provide training. So it's again a collaborative effort. We have a role to play as both as advisors and litigators, but they have their role to play also in finding solutions to the liabilities that arise or that are identified.
In a cooperative fashion.
I'm sorry?
We can work together in a cooperative fashion.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're looking for.
And to Chief Moore, who I've known since he was a sergeant and up the ranks, it won't have to get no. I mean, he's very committed and very dedicated. When he was bureau chief in the Valley, he was hands-on, tactical situations. And if everyone had that same kind of demeanor and that same kind of desire and inspiration, I don't think we'd be in this boat with people who want to take advantage of the system. And I look at it as taking advantage of the system, especially when someone gets $1 million lawsuit and then comes back to work the next day and laughs at the system. And then the colleagues say, well, wait a second, maybe I can get my piece of the $1 million. And that situation takes place. The issue with the fire department, I understand you want to jump on the bandwagon too.
As I sit here,
to be very blunt,
yeah, it's very amazing that two different departments have come up with the same solution, and all I can say, it's not rocket scientists. It's not rocket science here.
Is that because I came up with this idea?
Exactly, that's what June told me to say. But
thank you, June.
But we've both arrived at the same decision. We've both arrived at the same solutions, and so we both have the issue of resources, and obviously that's why we're here.
Right.
We will be in the same position requesting a risk manager. Right now we have 4 captains and 1 battalion chief doing all of litigation, work comp, and safety for the fire department.
Didn't we approve some civilian positions for you folks?
No, not in this arena. In our professional standards division, yes, we have civilian investigators, and those are sorely needed, and we appreciate the support there. We need the same support in our risk management. We have done I would say we've done an impressive job. 5 to 10 years ago, as we all know, we spent close to $20 million in lawsuits.
Internal lawsuits?
Internal lawsuits, absolutely. our external lawsuits are minimal.
Right.
But our internal is where we had the problem. And after we sat down and analyzed the cases and determined what were the issues, and we ourselves fixed those issues, you do not see multi-million-dollar work environment issues here today because we took those actions. And it was through the risk management section. It was through better practices on our part. But we are maxed out. We now need this all-risk person that can truly professionalize our risk management. And so, as the PD is requesting, we will soon be also. I've had a conversation with our independent assessor, who, as you know, works for the Fire Commission. He is doing an audit of our litigation, and he has arrived at the same solution also. And I asked him if I could bring that up here, and he said, absolutely, it's not a secret, and he sees we need the same type of expertise managing our risk management effort. And so his report and his audit will come up with the same solution.
And those dollars that we're going to save, those millions of dollars, give us the ability to provide better service to the people of Los Angeles, better equipment, and taking care of our employees who serve the public. So,
absolutely,
you know, one employee gets $1 million. That $1 million goes around to a lot of services for a lot of people. The other issue that I had, with question regarding the Protective League, they support the position. There is a question, there is a rumor, it's no big secret, that someone from the city attorney's office, they want to plug into the spot. And there's a concern that a comprehensive, I don't know if it has to be a nationwide review, but the person who has the experience and the ability in human relations and risk management, someone who's got that criteria. For Chief Moore can jump on a radio car and handle radio calls. Chief Mack can jump on a fire truck and probably drive the darn thing. I couldn't do that. The fact of the matter is we need someone who's not cherry-picked out of the city attorney's office, because that's the rumor, that we get someone who's competent and qualified, because if this works, this could be a model to continue on, and it would benefit everyone. Because I don't know who created that rumor, Jerry, but somehow that is bounding around.
Rumors create themselves.
Okay.
The chief of police will pick the most qualified the person he feels is the most qualified. And I can tell you at this point, nobody's been offered a job and nobody's been picked. And we will do a search as the personnel rules require.
And whether it's national or not, I just want to make sure that they meet that criteria, that they've got that experience, and that we don't put a position in and they criticize, why do we do this?
The ultimate, I don't want to use a trite phrase, but the ultimate proof will be in the pudding. It'll be if we pick somebody and then we succeed, then we will have done a good job.
And so the review would be within the police department, report to the Audits Government Efficiency Commission. To the Audits Government Efficiency and to Public Safety. We could do a combined meeting. We don't want to belabor them with that. And show a trend. Are we up or down? What do we do? What are we accomplishing? And then when it comes to the command staff, as Chief Moore knows, you've got all the issues for the command staff with the plotting of crimes and this. They do a lot of it with that, but I don't know if they do a whole lot with this risk management aspect.
Let me say this. We will report that, but we will also report what we're doing, which is important. Because a lot of times you don't see the results for 6 months. We will give you a report as
Quarterly reports.
Yeah, in writing, as I just said now, we will give you a report telling you what steps we are taking, and we will try, in as terms allowed by the city attorney and the police officer's Bill of Rights, to tell you what we've done, the kinds of situations we've handled.
We don't need names. All we need is to make sure that we resolved it.
We have to be real careful that we're not too specific so that it doesn't identify.
Well, Chief, you and I remember when they had the rap sheet, and you go to roll call, they read rap, so-and-so did this, so-and-so this, and it was a nice warning. They didn't give the names, but they'd give the rank, and then you could identify who that person was. But it served a purpose to say, don't do this because you get in trouble.
But, and as, Councilman, you're exactly right, and as a point of reference, this past Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, the Board of Police Commissioners received the department's second quarterly report on discipline that it accounted for type of allegations and outcomes to include every rank within and pay grade within the organization, both civilian and sworn, and including command officers.
The old rap sheet? Like the old rap sheet?
No names.
No,
but the rap sheet is still generated. It still presents the rank or pay grade and a brief description and outcome as to penalty. But again, the information that is being at times rumored and suggested is thrown out there that there's a lack of accountability. It's difficult to prove a negative. But the department believes that this individual can, with a focus, begin to address these perceptions, for instance, that in the command staff ranks of this organization, that there is not an accountability. I will tell you, as being a command officer for some 10 or 12 years, 13 years now, that I believe there is accountability, and I know individual colleagues who have suffered, if you will, and been disciplined for acts or omissions. Sometimes people might argue to a greater degree than lower line, which I would argue is right and appropriate given their position. But having said that, this again is another step that's going to allow us and this reporting mechanism through the Board of Police Commissioners in consultation with the city attorney, so that we don't create more litigation, more internal litigation for missteps in our descriptions of what we were doing. The department is fully supportive of.
Now the issue with the police commission, my goal is not to have them manipulate it. My goal is to give them information so it comes to us fresh and it doesn't get manipulated by the commission.
Excuse me.
Or sanitized by the commission.
You're talking to the person who wrote that report about MacArthur Park. Nothing I ever present, or this chief will ever present, will be sanitized or manipulated.
Okay.
The commission will get in public our report, which will then go to the council. That public report will be public report. So.
But just as a point of clarification, just as to the charter, the Board of Police Commissioners does remain the head of the department, and as such, I think in this instance, as department representatives, it's appropriate for us to identify that it is subject to their direction otherwise.
No, I understand that, but I want to make sure that when it goes there, as you know, what happens is oftentimes reports get modified. Like you as a chief, when somebody sends something up, by the time you see it, it's going to be beautiful. But if you saw it on the street, it wouldn't be so beautiful?
Well, we would hope that our transparency, it will be shown. And again, the department is open to that critique. Otherwise, that if there's evidence or suggestions that we're somehow, doing Kentucky windage on this, then there's no desire to do so.
I can personally assure you that that will never happen when I'm around. Because
the league, is there any other comment from the league on that matter? Is the league still here? I guess they got other important things to do. So what I would like then, if we can instruct the CLA to convene a task force to first report back on this in 90 days.
I'm sorry, on what?
On the formation to get this thing moving forward, so we can actually put something into place and not wait forever to get it done.
You're talking about the task force or our position?
Well, no, the position we want to move forward with the conditions that we explained.
Okay.
But we also want to establish risk management task force and audit government efficiency to track the progress. And I know we're going to get a request in from the fire department for a similar position, similar kind of search. Obviously, it won't be the same person. But in other words, what we're trying to do is be proactive, as we've been reactive for so many years, to avoid and prevent and do what we can do to eliminate those problems. That's the goal.
Can I just gain some clarity from the chair?
Mr. Chair.
Well, you're both chairs. This is a joint committee.
Or we're both sitting in chairs.
I just wanted some clarification based on earlier comments that were made by the two chairs. You had talked about having the departments reporting to HEE as well as to the Public Safety Committee. In terms of that report, is the expectation that the reports are going to emanate from the task force, or is the expectation that the reports are going to emanate from the departments?
From the department.
So where does the role of the task force play with respect to your expectation as to what the department is going to be doing?
Say to make sure that the task force would be combined with the police and the fire and risk management in general, but the specifics would be with each department to bring forth their reports. So we want to examine this on a level including both, but we want specifics from each department.
Okay. Can we work with the CAO and work with the city attorney? Because what I see is that the core of the task force is going to be composed of the three departments. Risk management is such a broad topic that I think we need to figure out what it is that we're going to do and then isolate certain issues pertaining to each of the departments and then move forward in an incremental and more strategic approach.
That's fine.
I think, you know, that what's being discussed here is probably a little bit more global with respect to long-range goals that the police department has. But I'd like to get together with CAO and risk management.
Well,
and
they want the
city
position, and they
attorney.
need to do some search of the position, but we want to make sure that in this one-year term, if this glows as we hope it will glow, and reduction in liability as we hope it will do, then we can find some progress in that with this new understanding, which, and too bad this wasn't set up a long, long time ago, for everyone's benefit.
Okay, well, can we just sort of figure it out first
Yeah.
and then come back and report on what we recommend and?
I think we've got the basics down. Jerry, you agree with that?
Yes. And I just had a question. Are we going to still, assuming this committee passes, our request for the position will be in council on Friday?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Yeah, and until this person's appointed, I will be the person that will deal with this task force, so.
Okay.
Whatever
That'll be just really lovely.
the CLA and the CAO and the city attorney want, will be more than cooperative.
But that'll work for everyone. But
So we're approving the resolution authority for this position?
with the conditions that we outlined.
Yes, and with the report back in 90 days, you said, right?
Yeah.
Now that you guys had your conversation, can I say something?
No.
Kind of wondering.
We're done now. Thank you very much.
Feel free, of course.
All right. Let me just say a few things here. One thing, I would hope that before we get going too quickly, that the CAO is responsible for risk management in the city, and we need to include them in whatever process, so that we're not.
We did include them, didn't we?
I didn't hear CAO.
Well, no, I
CLA.
said the core of the task force will be CAO, CLA, and city attorney, because CAO does have the risk management function.
That's right. The other thing I would
You
hope
weren't
we
listening,
do-
sir.
I'm sorry.
Pay attention. Hold them.
I'm sorry. The other thing I'd like to make sure is that the number of reports that the current city attorney gives us on litigation, on the listing of cases that are pending, the attachments that many people don't read, that may be a basis before we start creating new reports to let people see what's already being done, because it's just not after the fact. They're telling us about cases well in advance, and any case that's on outside counsel, we must approve that dollar amount before they take on the case, so we know before the case gets started what the dollar amount is. So those are the things I think start the basis, because there's a lot of stuff that gets generated, just a matter of whether it's understood or read. The other thing I would think that we'd have to do, and this is, I'll give Chief Moore my one issue that I'm a little concerned about, is that the risk management unit was started in 2001 for the very reason that you're articulating what the problems are 11 years later. And what we're today calling a liability management committee used to be called the risk management committee, with some of the same folks that were on it. And so something went haywire in the last 10 years, that emphasis wasn't placed on the very things that today we're saying were important. And I think one of the committees I was on, we questioned when the commander was moved out of risk management, and you moved it to a captain, and now we're bringing it to a civilian commander. And we said, why do we want to drop that level of oversight? And now we're back to that level of oversight. The issue of, we've asked in Budget and Finance, because to look at this one-on-one span of control, because it's unusual for the city, and particularly the CAO, to approve where you have a one-on-one from the civilian commander, the position you're asking for, to supervise one person, which is the Captain 3. And so that's something, because that Captain 3 was really put there in replace of the commander. Right. And now we're replacing the commander but keeping the Captain 3. So in effect, the Captain 3 runs the division, and the new commander, that civilian, says there's a lot of other tasks, but they go through, everything goes through that captain. So we asked the CEO to look at that and address it. The one thing also I think is that when we go back and look at risk management, and there is a discussion about whether it's after the fact, One of the things I think there is a need, and we've started at least on traffic collisions, that we have made, as we go back, and we've made a number of changes in the discipline system. And when we hear at a number of our claims boards that we have the serious accident, several $1 million, and we find out what is the discipline, and what we're told is they get 2 points on their driving record. And you're saying, what's 2 points? And they said, well, we adopted the Auto Club kind of insurance policy. Well, I've only seen maybe 4 times that we de-emphasized the discipline on traffic collisions, and every time we went back because we found the only thing that keeps people from wrecking cars is that you discipline them. And each time they wreck cars, you discipline them even higher, and to the point that they stop wrecking cars or they're driving someone else's car. And so we've asked whether this new system that started in 2008, whether we've seen a significant increase in this. We're working with the CAO, the city attorney, on that. So I do think that, and again, we're making a call to Chief Beck because I'm a little concerned about the recent article that talked about our discipline system being changed to where we're tailor-making it to an officer and things of that nature. And I forget the terms that were used, but it appeared that we're being, what's the term, more humanistic. And that's something that I think before we plunge headlong into that, we really need to think about the liability to it, because I think all you have to do is look at the fire department before, and they took discipline real serious. Those are things that happen in their department to where people, I think we had one case, the most egregious I saw, is we had a captain that had, I think, 3 or 4 22-day suspensions.
You're talking about the fire department, right?
Fire department.
Okay, all right,
That's the thing. These are things that I think we all should learn from.
It wasn't you.
Because they kept saying it was progressive discipline, except it kept being 22 days. And you say, how many 22-day suspensions do you get? And so these are things I think we have to look at, that accountability. And I'd hope the department would look at, police department, which we've always been concerned about. What's the percentage of complaints that are sustained? That's a clear indication of whether we're taking it serious. We tried to open up the discipline system a while back and say, you must take all of them. But if we're taking them all and the percentages are significantly less, then the public is wondering, what are you doing with them? Yes. And so these are things that I'd hope you look at.
But we're looking at risk management, so I understand discipline, but
that's all part of it. Discipline drives risk management. You should know that by your complaint history.
I got a great complaint history.
But the issue is that also what we need to look at, and this is one that the city attorney, and we've talked about it numerous times, is that, and I don't have the answer, but when we get sued on both sides of an employee relations problem, and we lose both sides, it sends a message to the commanding officer, don't do anything, because you can get sued for doing your job. And on the other hand, we send a message that to the people involved that it's okay for misconduct because you might benefit financially. And we've lost a ton of both sides of the cases. The fire department is a good example. I mean, they've done some things to discipline people, and then all of a sudden, all the people they disciplined sued and made more money than the person that they mistreated. And so I think we need to be aware that that is a very, very tough situation. I don't have the answer. I don't know how to address it. But the message, I think, particularly in the police and fire, is they are very litigious. And the moment that management makes one step that they are not in agreement with, you're going to end up with another lawsuit. We dealt with one today on this alleged quota. And the issue is that could cost us $10 million. And particularly when we go back into the facts of it, the captain never created a quota. A sergeant wrote a line in a log or a comment card that said 18 and 80%. Captain never said that. Yet we're paying $2 million to them and several million to those who follow. And so I think we need to be aware of what that accountability is and look at whether we're really sending the message that it is harmful. A guy I used to work with years ago, Chief Rock, used to say, you couldn't survive with what we call no harm incidents. Because if you have no harm incidents, then people will continually do them. And then when we make a judgment as to the end result and it has no harm, then that's the message to say keep doing it. But those are the things I'm concerned about as to what happened to risk management from 2001 to today, because that was all of the reasons why it was done. And if it were done properly, then we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about, instead of a risk management committee, we're going to have a liability committee. These are things that are important. And I think the other side is when you make those adjustments in the system, because they all interrelate with each other, something's got to be evaluated to determine what the outcome is. And if we don't determine that ahead of time, we'll do a couple of oopses like we did with traffic collisions in years past. Don't discipline people, and then we shocked at the number of cars that get wrecked, the liability goes up, and then we say, that probably wasn't a good idea. But every 10 years or so, we find that same message, and we bring it back, and next thing you know, we find out it doesn't work. So I would just hope you look at those things as we go forward, because we're seeing a ton of liability in our claims board, and that we're getting approved at council. And you know, they've almost convinced me in the CAO's office that we should be putting this liability in departments' budgets and let them manage it, because it's out of control.
And Councilman, to each of your points, I can tell you that the department is at the direction of the Board of Police Commissioners, but also in direction of the Chief of Police, evaluating. When you talk about our traffic collision, this point system, while we have seen reduction in traffic collisions, officer-involved collisions, we are not convinced. We're not final as to the evaluation of that system and its impact. As to the conditional ORs, it's a very active discussion within the department and a very high interest of the Board of Police Commissioners into this strategy. So each of the points that you make, the original risk management initiative, or not the original, but the version that you're well aware of in the start of this past decade, it has evolved over the years, as you have stated, but it has also performed. The Risk Management Committee, which my membership on and other memberships has, I think, has benefited from that construction and from strategies, training, discipline, accountability that was renewed in the late 90s and early part of this decade. With that said, this is yet another effort to continue to tune that and to continue to work and strive. It's not perfect, but we believe it's the next step to restore some issues and to improve our overall performance.
My final point is also, what was the term you used about ORs?
Conditional ORs.
You might just read the charter and see if you could really do that.
Okay.
The charter is very specific about what discipline is and what you can classify them. So you might just, when I read it, I couldn't find that term.
Okay.
Our next step, if it doesn't work, then we would go to the departments and the liability would come out of their budgets. That would be the next step, which would really be interesting. Because the departments that don't have a problem, they make out well. The departments that have a problem, that would be a serious consequence to say we better watch what we're doing.
This is something for the task force to consider.
Yes, it is.
Citywide.
Because that's been brought up before by people. Have the departments take it out of their budget.
You may want to run fast on that because the CAOs, I think, is already looking at that.
I have been talking about it for the last 8 years.
Or we can take it out of the salaries of the top command.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
Wait.
We
You
do
got it
need.
all, June, we're done.
No, wait, no, nobody can leave.
Tell the man with the gun that.
Okay, Mr. Chaleff is ready to provide clarity on the Captain 3 and police administrator.
That is a transitional position, and as this develops, we may end up removing the Captain 3 and sending that person back into another position because we determine we don't need it.
I hope so.
And that's what we're doing.
And the other thing, we made a couple of corrections in budget and finance.
And correct, and we want to ensure that the action of the committee is to concur with the,
Budget and finance.
yes.
With the amendments that we've made.
With the additional.
Yes.
Everybody set?
So
Any other
moved.
issues?
No objections.
All approved.
We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, she's got it in the record here, so it's going to be recorded.
One thing that that thing with the Chapter 3,
That's brand new. Budget finance, they never mentioned.
Right.
That's why we added the instruction for them.
And I was listening in, so that's why I went to Mr. Chalef to say, what's the rate?
And that other one where they said that this position is solely responsible.
Yes, that was wrong.
Yeah.
Can only recommend. Is that in there? Okay. So do you have the Budget and Finance Committee report? Oh, okay. All right. Correct. And so this is the AGE action that was taken when it was considered in West LA. Right. Okay. And so